تبارك الذي بيده الملك وهو على كل شيء قدير.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وأصلي وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تمسك بسنته إلى يوم الدين. Welcome back to another surah from the blessed chapters of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from the second last Juz of the Quran, the 29th Juz of the Quran, entitled Juz Tabarak. In the previous section or segment we spoke about Surah Al-Muddaththir, speaking about the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam and his journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or building the concept of spirituality. Today's surah, the 74th chapter of the Quran, Surah Al-Muddaththir, in essence it continues the same theme or the same discussion, the discussion being about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And we find here telling the Prophet alayhi wasallam to go out, qum ya ayyuhal muddaththir qum fa'anzir, go out and to warn the people. And before that, many of us become, as we mentioned, hasty in going out to warn the people or to deliver the message. We spoke about how Surah Al-Muddaththir is speaking about the path of spirituality, of strengthening our spirituality and our own belief, our own conviction, and establishment of prayers, of extra prayers and reading of the Quran before we begin to go and preach to other individuals. Not to say that we shouldn't be preaching to other individuals, as this surah encourages or tells us to do, but some of us, as we can visualize, that we become very flawless in our concept of being worried about preaching to other individuals and not strengthening our own Iman. So even though this Surah Al-Muddaththir in format number is placed after Surah Al-Muzammil, but in essence it's revealed before Surah Al-Muzammil. It's a large view of the ulama that this is classified as the second surah or the second revelation sent to the Prophet ﷺ after Surah Al-Alaq, as we find in narration side Surah Al-Bukhari, that there was a fatra, there was a pause in the revelation, and then the Prophet ﷺ was walking out one day and he looked up to the heavens or the sky, and there was Jibreel there, and then these verses were sent down to him, Ya ayyuhal muddaththir qum fa'anzir, or one who is engrossed with his garments. As found Imam Sa'di, he highlights a similar meaning of al-Muzammil and Muddaththir, one being wrapped and one who is enshrouded with the garments, because he fled back to his wife Khadija radiallahu anha, as we find the beginning of Revelation, and he mentioned to what he had seen, what he visualized, what he was going through. And here ulama begin to discuss that it shows the wisdom and the understanding of Khadija radiallahu anha, understanding that he is going to become a great individual, great personality. He has been selected to become the messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he is calling out to her, Dathiruni, Zammiluni, cover me up, that I'm feeling this weakness, this coldness, or something is overcoming me. What have I seen inside my life? And she gives him that reassurance that, you're a person who's a truthful individual, and you keep ties with your kith and your kin and your family, tribesmen, etc., that you find that you are a noble individual. And this is indeed something from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So as we mentioned, these are all titles which are given to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. As Imam Sa'di mentions, that the resemblance or the twinning of Surah Al-Muzammil and Surah Al-Muddaththir is a common theme that exists amongst both of them. So this encouragement of calling upon the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, telling him, Ya ayyuhal muddaththir, one who is wrapped around in his garment. Some of the ulama tafsir, they mention in modern works of tafsir that this is saying awaken to all of mankind, that those who are engrossed in this dunya. So it doesn't just mean a person who could be away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that sense, because the Prophet alayhi salam, ما كنت تدري ما الكتاب ولا الإيمان. You never knew what Iman and what the revelation was until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted it to the Prophet alayhi salam, because that is the context of all these verses of Surah Al-Alaq and Muzammil and Muddaththir, that he was searching for revelation, he was searching for spirituality, and then you found it, we granted it to you. Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying to all of us, Ya ayyuhal muddaththir, those of us engrossed in the world, don't make time for da'wah, don't make time for the journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we need to remove this garment away from us, awaken from our sleep and our slumber, to come out in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Qum fa'anzir, come out and warn the people after we've developed a due diligence of spirituality inside our life. As Allah mentions in the Quran, وَأَنذِرْ عَشِيرَتَكَ الْأَقْرَبِينَ, come out and warn your close tribesmen, your close family members. And that's exactly what the Prophet alayhi salatu he done, he stood on the mountain, he called out to his people and told them to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Abu Lahab, he made that famous statement, Tabbat yadaka alihada jama'tana, may your two hands perish. Is this the reason that you called us and gathered us together for this purpose, to tell us to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And look how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala defended the Prophet alayhi salam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent a whole surah, Tabbat yada abi lahabin wa tab. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down, may the two hands of Abu Lahab, may they perish. And ulama of Tafseer, they discussed that Abu Lahab, he lived for quite some time when these verses were sent down. He could have professed belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He could have just been hypocritical and said, I believe in Allah, I believe in the messenger, to prove that the messenger is false. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down this surah whilst he is living. It's not verses speaking about Fir'aun who passed away, or speaking about previous nations and tribes. This person is individual. This individual is living, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is condemning him to the hellfire, and likewise his wife as well. And both of them refused to believe. Shows the miraculous nature of the Quran, and shows that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Wallahu ya'simuka minan nas, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will defend you from the people. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will defend the identity of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, which is throughout the Quran, as we mentioned, that praise that goes to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Here as well inside the surah, Ya ayyuhal muddaththir qum fa'andhir wa rabbaka fakabbir. And you give call to mankind, wa rabbaka fakabbir, and glorify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inside the end of Surah Al-Isra that we find, wa kabbirhu takbira, make glorification, takbir of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as if this ayah or this message is saying that the greatest thing, wala dhikrullahi akbar, the greatest dhikr is the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That don't praise mankind, don't praise human beings. Be continuous, keep your tongue moist with the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, glorifying and magnifying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَرَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِّرْ, and cleanse your garments. Some ulama go to the view, the literal meaning of cleansing your garments, keeping your garments pure and clean. As some of them discussed in Taharat al-Badan, the purity of the external body of the individual is a reflection of Taharat al-Qalb, is a reflection of the purity of the heart, is one view that exists there. And some say it's not totally true, that person needs to make sure everything with the external body is pristine, but there's a deeper inner meaning, that person who spiritually cleanses themselves tries to keep themselves away from impurities inside their life. وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِرْ, Imam Sa'di inside his tafsir, he goes to a deeper meaning. وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِرْ says that purify your intentions. Stay away from ariya wal-ujab, from showing off, being startled, praising oneself. But that's what it really, the deeper meaning is. وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِرْ, because thiyab, as some of the ulama describe, is the inner garment. So here they say it's the inner enclosure of the individual, need to purify inside their lives. And even some have even gone to the view discussion that maybe we can just highlight upon that. What thiyabaka tahir is to keep your lower garment, purify your lower garment. Is some discussion that some ulama have made regarding the external dress as well, should be in the sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. وَرَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِرْ وَرُجْسَ فَهْجُرْ, and rujs, which is al-asnam, the idols, any form of shirk, then abandon or stay away from that. So people who are committing shirk with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, stay away from that. And other ulama say is stay away from al-ma'asi wa dhanub. Purify yourself from ma'asi and dhanub. Purify yourself from shirk with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one interpretation. Purify yourself from dhanub, from sins and disobedience towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَرُجْسَ فَهْجُرْ وَلَا تَمْنُنْ فَاسْتَكْثِرْ, and don't give to people with the intention that you should be granted more. So قُمْ فَأَنذِرْ, when a person is given da'wah, person isn't giving da'wah to people to be granted something more, to be granted praise, or to be granted respect, or to give charity to people, or to help people that you may be given something more back in return, or you may be recognized. This is all, as ulama described at the beginning of surah, is just tazkiyah, is purification, trying to purify yourself internally, purify your intentions, your thoughts, your external garments, the actions that you do, just trying to make sure that everything is done for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then Allah mentions, وَلِرَبِّكَ وَلَا تَمْنُنْ تَسْتَكْثِرْ وَلِرَبِّكَ فَاصْبِرْ, that whilst in the path of carrying out these actions, you need to have patience. Patience in doing these actions, just like inside Surah Al-Muzammil, wasbir sabran jamila. Have a beautiful patience. So here once again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reminding the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam that you need to be patient in your task in giving the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala towards mankind. وَلِرَبِّكَ فَاصْبِرْ. Have patience towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَإِذَا نُقِرَ فِي النَّاقُورِ. Then once again the theme goes towards the last day. That after commandments are given, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in general always reminds us about the last day. وَالنَّاقُورِ is, as ulama have described, is the depiction of the trumpet, is an image of the trumpet on the blowing of the horn, which is the naqur, is the shape of a horn that we find that will take place. The qarn, as they mention in some works of tafsir, the horn on the last day. فَذَلِكَ يَوْمَئِذٍ يَوْمٌ عَسِيرٌ. Indeed, that day is a very, very difficult day. And in many places inside the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the last day as being a very, very difficult day for people, mankind. That day, عَلَى الْكَافِرِينَ غَيْرُ يَسِيرٌ. And specifically upon the disbelieving individuals, it's not going to be something which is easy or something which is going to be light. ذَرْنِي وَمَنْ خَلَقْتُ وَحِيدًا. And once again, just like inside Al-Muzammil, don't worry about the people who don't follow the path or they're trying to harm you. ذَرْنِي وَمَنْ خَلَقْتُ وَحِيدًا. Leave me alone to the one I created. And here some of the ulama of the Tafseer, they mention these ayat are referring to Walid ibn Mughira, who as a side point was the father of Khalid ibn Walid. Look how the father disbelieved, but look how the son entered into faith. So some of the ulama say that these verses speaking about him, about his rude conduct towards the Prophet ﷺ. Just like we mentioned Abu Lahab, you find that the chieftains of the Quraysh, they had this immense hatred towards the Prophet ﷺ, even though for some of them he was their nephew, he was their family member, he was their clansman. But you find that وَلِرَبِّكَ فَاصْبِرْ, that in your calling to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's going to be not just external people who don't like your call and don't like the da'wah. There could be closer elements of people amongst your own family members who don't like the person calling to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ذَرْنِي وَمَنْ خَلَقْتُ وَحِيدًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, leave me alone to deal with this individual I created all on my own. As we mentioned, this individual, as some of the ulama tafsir mentioned, is going back to Walid ibn Mughira, who became an individual showing animosity, hatred towards the Prophet ﷺ. But the meaning is plausible for any individual who shows any an obstacle towards Islam or speaks ill of Islam, speaks ill of the messenger or any of the messengers or towards the Quran. وَجَعَلْتُ لَهُ مَالًا مَمْدُودًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then highlights, look at this privilege that we've given to this individual, or these individuals, we've given them children, and immense wealth has been granted to these individuals. وَبَنِينَ شُهُودًا. And sons have been granted them as a form of witness towards their power and their glory. وَمَهَدْتُ لَهُ تَمْهِيدًا. And we made life comfortable for them is a general rough rendition of this verse. As some of the ulama they mentioned, that life is easy, is comfortable for them. A good life has been given to them. ثُمَّ يَطْمَعُ أَنْ أَزِيدَ. And a strange thing is that they still aspire for more. That even after being given these blessings of wealth, of children, and a comfortable life, they want more to be given to them. كَلَّا إِنَّهُ كَانَ لِآيَاتِنَا عَنِيدًا. The real concern about these individuals is these blessings don't take them to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, rather become individuals who begin to reject the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. سَأُرْهِقُهُ سَعُودًا. We're going to make him to climb in his Sa'ud. And ulama tafsir mentioned Sa'ud is a mountain inside Jahannam. So this individual is going to be made to climb a mountain inside Jahannam. إِنَّهُ فَكَّرَ وَقَدَّرَ. He planned and he plotted what he's going to say about the Prophet ﷺ, what words to say about him, how to attack him, how to go against him. فَقُتِلَ كَيْفَ قَدَّرَ. Then may he be destroyed for what he planned and what he plotted. ثُمَّ قُتِلَ كَيْفَ قَدَّرَ. Then again he be destroyed for what he planned, what he wanted to carry out. ثُمَّ نَظَرَ. Then he glanced, then he thought, then he frowned, then he said, ثُمَّ أَدْبَرَ وَاسْتَكْبَرَ. Then he turned away and he became arrogant. فَقَالَ إِنْ هَذَا إِلَّا سِحْرٌ يُؤْثَرُ. This is nothing but magic. Tales of the ancient, tales of the past people that existed before. Speech is just magic, the speech of the Prophet ﷺ. Meaning there's not much he could say. There's not really much of rebuttal he could give. This is the only thing that he could say. إِنْ هَذَا إِلَّا قَوْلُ الْبَشَرِ. This is nothing but the speech of a human being. And as we mentioned, this surah and the previous surah is speaking about the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is speaking about the Quran. As if to say that a hidden message about Surah Al-Muddaththir, that the Quran is the divine speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, recited upon that, reflect upon it, establish the meaning of the Quran, the truth of the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and likewise inside this surah as well, that he cannot say anything against the Quran or make something like onto the Quran or narrate something like the Quran. In hada illa qawlul bashar sa'uslihi saqar. We're going to throw this individual who rejects the Quran, who rejects the Messenger, rejects Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're going to throw him inside Saqar. And Saqar is one of the names of Jahannam, the 7 names of Jahannam mentioned inside the Quran. وَمَا أَدَرَاكَ مَا سَقَرْ. What will explain to you what Saqar, what Jahannam, what the hellfire is. لَا تُبْقِي وَلَا تَذَرْ. Nothing remains, or nothing can remain there except for that it destroys it inside Jahannam. لَوَّاحَةٌ لِلْبَشَرِ. It changes the color of the human being, the intense heat that is going to be there inside Jahannam. عَلَيْهَا تِسْعَةَ عَشَرٍ. Upon the hellfire is 19 angels are placed there. So here we find once again, rather than the Quraysh submitting to the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created, or being worried about the punishment that awaits them or awaits any individual who disbelieves in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we find mockery. And this is a common theme throughout the Quran, sukhriya. They will mock the prophets, mock the verses of the Quran, mock the lessons of the Quran. Once again, goes back to a weak belief in the unseen, that people begin to make humor and comedy and joke about paradise and hellfire and say it's a figment of the mind. And even this, may Allah forbid, has trickled into some of the Muslims, that even inside they begin to question the concept of the last day, that is there really going to be a Jahannam? Is there really a punishment of such a nature? And here the Quraysh, they said, going back to Abu Jahl, he said, if there's only 19 angels, look how many men we have. We'll fight our way out of Jahannam. And, it shows, excuse the expression, the stupidity that they thought that there's only 19 angels, we'll just fight our way out of Jahannam, because we are known as being victorious warriors. So inside even Jahannam will come. That's why even people make jokes that, if we'll be in Jahannam for a short while, we'll come out of Jahannam, or we'll take our haram inside Jahannam, we'll have a great big party inside Jahannam and enjoy himself inside Jahannam. All words of kufr and disbelief and failing to understand the power of the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another individual, he said, okay, if there's only 19 angels inside Jahannam, he said that I will take on 17 of them. And the rest of you Quraysh, you can help with the other 2. And this individual, some of the works of Tafseer they mentioned, he was known for being a strong individual. And if you placed a rug or a carcass of a skin of an animal underneath his feet, they wouldn't be able to pull it from underneath his feet, because he was so powerful and so strong. And then he challenged the Prophet ﷺ for a wrestle, for a bout. And the Prophet ﷺ beat him on many occasions. He still refused to submit. And it shows the strength of the Prophet ﷺ. وَمَا جَعَلْنَا أَصْحَابَ النَّارِ إِلَّا مَلَائِكَةً. And we made that these companions of hellfire to be angels. Now here, these angels that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed there, they're not angels of mercy and compassion, which may be the common theme that comes into our mind. These angels are severe and harsh, who have been placed upon Jahannam. As Allah mentions at Surah Al-Tahrim, عَلَيْهَا مَلَائِكَةٌ غِلَاظٌ شِدَادٌ لَا يَعْصُونَ اللَّهَ مَا أَمَرَهُمْ وَيَفْعَلُونَ مَا يُؤْمَرُونَ. That these are not the angels of mercy, the angels of paradise, or the angels who come to take the soul of an individual, of mercy that we find for the believers. These are harsh angels, who 19 has been mentioned. Some of the ulama tafsir say that this is min bab al-kathra. That just means excessive numbering. As Ibn Kathir even goes to the view, it's not actually 19. وَمَا يَعْلَمُ جُنُودَ رَبِّكَ إِلَّا هُ. None knows who the soldiers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are except for him. As if he says this is ishara, it could be far beyond 19, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just selected 19. Some try to say that there is an actual spiritual meaning why it's 19. Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah speaks about when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions about 7 tawaf around the Kaaba, 7 verses of Surah Al-Fatiha that we find, 7 doors of paradise that we find. He tries to make this spiritual, mystical deduction about the number 7 that we find, which is delving slightly too deep into numerics, because the Quran isn't a numeric format. That's why we find that Rashad Khalifa, a famous American biologist, if I'm not mistaken, was assassinated in 1990. He had this theory about 19, and he tried to decipher the Quran in its numerical format. And then when certain verses never fit into his theory, then he began to unfortunately reject them. And that's why we said that we shouldn't approach the Quran as a scientific book, or trying to decipher certain things beyond the remit of the human being, trying to find certain things, just like we find people say that Bismillah Rahman Rahim, that 786 is a resemblance of Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Allah didn't send coded digits. Allah didn't say 786 means Bismillah Rahman Rahim. وَإِنَّهُ مِن سُلَيْمَانَ وَإِنَّهُ بِسْمِ اللَّهِ الرَّحْمَنِ الرَّحِيمِ. Quran begins with 113 times inside the Quran mentions Bismillah Rahman Rahim upon every single surah except for Surah At-Tawbah. That missing Basmala is placed inside Surah Al-Naml, whereby Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to, mentioned Sulaiman alayhi salam sent a letter to Bilqis, and he began it by saying Bismillah Rahman Rahim. So this Greek numeric format of taking numbers and say alif means 10 and ba means this is all not a true understanding of the format and understanding the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as it becomes, we mentioned, it becomes dangerous when people begin to follow this format of trying to understand. And also what can be extracted from here is the concept of having doubt about that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned, because Allah here mentions in these verses that people will not وَلَا يَرْتَابَ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ, that these parables and amthal that Allah mentions inside the Quran, that people who of the book and people who really believe, they don't have any doubt or they don't have any sickness inside their hearts. وَلِيَقُولَ الَّذِينَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ مَرَضٌ وَالْكَافِرُونَ مَاذَا أَرَادَ اللَّهُ بِهَذَا مَثَلًا. When people ponder too much and say, what does Allah want via this example? This is the people with sicknesses inside their heart and people of hypocrisy. Just like in the beginning of the Quran, Allah mentions فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ مَرَضٌ فَزَادَهُمُ اللَّهُ مَرَضًا. The hypocrites have a sickness inside their heart, so Allah increases the sickness in their excessive questioning. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions at the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah, speaking about these amthal, these parables, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lays out these parables, and some individuals, they go astray in not trying to understand these parables or trying to question these parables. Because many of these parables are examples that Allah gives for us to reflect and to ponder upon. That's why Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, he's tried to collect the 80 or 90 or amthal fil Quran and list them and try to decipher them to help us to understand what these parables mean. These parables haven't been placed there for us to jest or to mock them or try to question them. Rather, all these parables are parables of the unseen. كَذَلِكَ يُضِلُّ اللَّهُ مَن يَشَاءُ وَيَهْدِي مَن يَشَاءُ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, via these parables or these examples or this numbering, He guides whomever He wants and He misguides whomever He wants. So many things of the Quran are unseen, that we have to accept it in face value, that we according to our rationale, we may not be able to understand it. For example, it comes to mind the concept of Ya'juj and Ma'juj, mentions inside Surah Al-Anbiya inside the Quran, that the Gog and Magog, which it mentions inside the Bible as well. So when people question that, how will Ya'juj and Ma'juj come upon the face of the earth? How would a Dajjal, how would the Antichrist appear? Where is he now? How is he living? Where is the island? And these ahadith are questionable. They're not mutawatir in nature. They're ahad, they're single narrations, etc. And all this leads on to eventually doing what? Questioning the Quran. That our intellect, I don't understand it via my intellect, it's not plausible. Yet many of these themes are discussed inside the Quran, inside Surah Al-Kahf, the 18th chapter of the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about so many things of the unseen inside there, whether it be the sleepers of the cave, Ashab al-Kahf, the young boys who slept inside the cave, that they slept for 309 years or so, that they slept for. How did they sleep for 300 odd years? How is that plausible? And they awoke. How is it plausible that Dhul Qarnayn traversed over the vast expansion of the land and the oceans, and he built that barrier? It is discussed inside this surah. So many aspects of the Quran is the unseen, and we have to believe inside it. And excessive questioning only derails one or takes one away from the true belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Kalla wal qamar. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins to speak about those things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created indeed via the moon, wal layli idh adbar, the night when it comes taking over, or the subhi idha asfar, when the morning explodes, or the yellowness of the morning it comes out. Innaha la ihda al-kubar. Indeed, this is amongst the great signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning some ulama interpret it as this is amongst the great signs, the coming of the day of judgment. Innaha la ihda al-kubar. Indeed, this is from amongst the great signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the signs of the day of judgment. Nadhira lil bashar, as a forewarning towards mankind, the coming of the day of judgment. لِمَنْ شَاءَ مِنْكُمْ أَنْ يَتَقَدَّمَ أَوْ يَتَأَخَّرَ. Whoever amongst you wants to go forward in doing actions in their belief towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or those who want to go back or delay themselves. That all this belief about the unseen, about Jahannam, about the angels, about the last day, the coming of the last day. Those who believe inside it will go forth in pursuing the path towards the last day, a path of developing the actions towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Kullu nafsin bima kasabat rahina. Every single soul stands as a testimony, as an assurance or insurance upon their own self, that they can testify regarding themselves what path they've been following upon this dunya. Illa ashab al-yameen. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives this extra praise to the people of the right hand, or companions of the right hand, meaning the people of paradise. Fi jannatin yatasa'alun. They're going to be now asking inside paradise. So when they were being mocked inside the dunya, that people were mocking them, now they're going to ask inside the eternal bliss. They're going to now ask, what happened to these individuals? Anil mujrimeen. Where are the criminals? Where are these individuals who used to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and used to mock at us whilst we were praying? So these individuals, Allah mentions, Ma salakakum fi saqar. Why have you entered into saqar? Even though Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows why they're inside saqar, or if the angels are posing this question to these individuals. So the answer is now given by these individuals. And here we can extract is the concept of sukhriya, of mocking, that even in Muslims, we should be very, very wary about making comments about the symbols of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Here they will say, قَالُوا لَمْ نَكُ مِنَ الْمُصَلِّينَ. We never used to offer the prayer. Whether be in its totality, that they never used to pray inside their lives. As we find the Sahaba, أَجْمَعُوا عَلَى ذَلِكَ. Sahaba companions are unanimous in that the person who abandons the prayer in its totality is a disbelieving individual. And that should awaken us, to make us to reflect. There was nothing that the companions were united upon. That the core element in all of these surahs, if we look at them, is continuously repeating the concept of as-salah. Whether it be inside Surah Al-Haqqa, Surah Al-Ma'arij, that we find inside Surah Al-Muzammil, Al-Muddaththir, we find a common theme is about establishing about as-salah. That belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the first action after belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, conviction, is the establishment of prayer. So if we said to these individuals, why you qalu lam nakum min al-musallin, the first answer they're going to give is, we never used to offer the prayer. We never used to pray upon this dunya. وَلَمْ نَكُنْ نُطْعِمُ الْمِسْكِينَ. We never used to feed the poor. So here we find any affection, mercy towards subjects upon the face of this earth, the giving of charity, giving of wealth, feeding the poor individuals. وَكُنَّا نَخُوضُ مَعَ الْخَائِضِينَ. We used to be amongst those individuals who used to squander and waste their time. We can spend hours on end discussing philosophy and logic and qila wa qal and this and that happened and this is happening, etc. Just wasting our time, squandering our time. And even sometimes even speaking about certain Islamic things, we're just wasting our time because it's not in our remit for us to be discussing those issues or to be delved inside those issues or to be worried about those issues, just wasting our time and our years away. وَكُنَّا نُكَذِّبُ بِيَوْمِ الدِّينِ. We used to reject the last day. And just as we mentioned, that the prime theme of all these surahs is the last day. The more you reject, or the weaker your concept is in the last day, the more weaker your actions will become in your build-up or coming towards the last day. وَكُنَّا نُكَذِّبُ بِيَوْمِ الدِّينِ. We used to reject the last day حَتَّى أَتَانَا الْيَقِينَ, until the reality came to us. And al-yaqeen huna بِمَعْنَى الْمَوْت. That when the reality here is al-yaqeen, is death. As Allah says inside the big end of Surah Al-Hijr, the 15th chapter of the Quran, وَعْبُدْ رَبَّكَ حَتَّى يَأْتِيَكَ الْيَقِينَ. Continue worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala until al-yaqeen, certainty, comes to you. Certainty here means when death approaches you, that you continuously worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is a message in itself, that ibadah lillahi subhanahu wa ta'ala continues throughout a person's life. There's no reaching a peak of spirituality and now you become non-observant of certain things. You continue in your ibadah is the message inside Surah Al-Muzammil and inside Surah Al-Muddaththir, as well as worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَمَا تَنْفَعُهُمْ شَفَاعَةُ الشَّافِعِينَ. And the intercession, those who can intercede, will not benefit them. That no one can intercede now and come and intercede for individual who never used to offer the prayer. As a large portion of ulama tafsir, they mention a person who doesn't pray, there's no intercession for them. As some people in our culture might think, just because I'm a Muslim, or by default I'm from amongst the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ, so if I didn't even pray, the intercession will be granted to me because I'm from amongst the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ. It doesn't quite work like that, as some of us may think. Intercession is something which is restricted and blessed, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will allow the Prophet ﷺ to make intercession for whom He wills and He wants him to make intercession for. And so there are guidelines for that intercession. Intercession can't just be granted to an individual who done none of the actions of obedience towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And rather, as we mentioned, that the prayer is something which leads a person outside the fold of Islam. If they were not praying 5 times in a day inside their lives, that is something very harsh and severe, that we should be worried about that ourselves and our family members. فَمَا لَهُمْ عَنِ التَّذْكِرَةِ مُعْرِضِينَ. So this tadhkirah, reminder of the Quran, the verses of Quran, it only turns them away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because they don't want to be receptive to the message of the Quran. كَأَنَّهُمْ حُمُرٌ مُسْتَنْفِرَةٌ, as if they are fleeing, any donkeys are running away. فَرَّتْ مِنْ قَسْوَرَةٍ, running away from the hunter who's hunting them. So this, as we mentioned, that this worried about the world, not worried about al-akhirah, running towards the prey of this dunya. This is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes even inside al-akhirah. The akhirah begin that people become helter-skelter inside, running towards, not knowing where they're doing. So how people behave in this dunya is how people behave towards inside al-akhirah as well. بَلْ يُرِيدُ كُلُّ امْرِئٍ مِّنْهُمْ أَن يُؤْتَ صُحُفًا مُنَشَّرًا. Each single one of them wants a clear record, a clear evidence to be granted to them. Yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has shown so many of His ayat, His signs, inside this book, all around them. And yet they're trying to say, give us some more signs, and then we're really going to believe. Even sometimes Muslims will say, give me, Ya Allah, show me signs. The signs are there, the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we recited it every single day, وَرَتِّلِ الْقُرْآنَ تَرْتِيلًا, we pondered over it, reflected upon it, we'll find the signs. Because even the word ayah, as ulama described, an ayah, the general meaning of ayah is a sign. It is a miracle in itself. So every ayah inside the Quran is a miracle that shows the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. كَلَّا بَلَّا يَخَافُونَ الْآخِرَةِ. But nay, these people, they don't fear the akhirah. They're not worried about the hereafter. The return back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. كَلَّا إِنَّهُ تَذْكِرَةٌ. Indeed, this is a reminder. Innahu, whether it be all of these verses, whether it be the last day, whether it be this surah, whether it be the Quran, all this is a tadhkirah. All this, or the sending of the Prophet ﷺ, is a reminder for all of us individuals. فَمَنْ شَاءَ الذَّكَرَ, for whoever wants to take heed towards that remembrance. وَمَا يَذْكُرُونَ إِلَّا إِنْ يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ. And the only ones who are going to take heed is whomever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if a person makes an effort to come towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will then grant the individual to come closer and closer to him, to find that path towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Huwa ahlul taqwa wa ahlul maghfirah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that we should have taqwa, consciousness regarding, wa ahlul maghfirah, and He is the one that we should seek forgiveness from. Just like in the previous surahs, as we mentioned, seeking forgiveness inside Surah Nuh that we find, Surah Al-Muddaththir, seeking forgiveness, and here inside this surah as well, seeking forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So our actions, our piety, and our devotion and our commitment is towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the muttaqun, the pious individuals, those who carry out the halal, who avoid the haram, who fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the open or in secrecy. Those are people of ahlul taqwa, people of taqwa, wa ahlul maghfirah, and the people who are seeking the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, knowing that they could and we will fall short in this dunya. And when we do fall short inside this dunya, if we're making forgiveness and asking forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will conceal or cover up mistakes. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make this recital of the Quran, the pondering of the Quran, this surah and all other surahs of the Quran, this Quran become hujjatun lana, la hujjatun alayna. Quran becomes an evidence for us and not an evidence against us. Whoever recites the Quran on a regular basis, recites it in Ramadan, follows it in Ramadan, the Quran will intercede for that individual that kept the person up during the day, during the night. And likewise, that total real intercession of the Prophet ﷺ will be granted those individuals who try to carry out these actions inside this dunya. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us amongst those individuals. وَقُولُ قَوْلِ هَذَا وَأَسْتَغْفِرُ لِي وَلَكُمْ وَلِجَمِيعِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ فَاسْتَغْفِرُوهُ إِنَّهُ هُوَ الْغَفُورُ الرَّحِيمُ.
تبارك الذي بيده الملك وهو على كل شيء قدير.